Hello, everyone. Welcome to our big webinar. We're going to get started in just a second. Thank you.
This is the part where we all smile, right?
Yes.
That's the part.
For those of you watching, if you want to grab some water, maybe a cup of coffee, maybe some snacks, we'll be running over the lunch hour if you're eating lunch. And just sit back, relax, enjoy the ride. Should we get started?
Yes, I think we will. All right, everyone. We are so happy you're joining us today. We are delighted to have Professor Jon Jachimowicz here with us today. And I will pass on now the mic to Deanna Lysenko, the BISG student who will quickly introduce our speaker. Thank you all so much. And Deanna, take it away.
Thank you, Maya. I am delighted to introduce today's speaker, Professor Jon Jachimowicz, who is an assistant professor in the Organizational Behavior Unit at the Harvard Business School. Please follow him at Twitter at JLNJ. And without further ado, please welcome Professor Jon Jachimowicz.
Thanks so much, y'all. It's good to see you. Feel free to use the chat if you'd like to throughout the talk. If you have questions as they arise, just drop them in the Q&A. I'll make sure to reserve plenty of time at the end to answer any and all of your questions that come your way. Because really, I see this as a conversation. And the part of the conversation is, first of all, I'm doing the very best at giving you a brief overview of some of the research I've been doing in the last couple of years, giving an understanding of why my team and I believe that some people are struggling to pursue their passion, what we can do better. But I'm also interested in your reactions and your questions that arise as a result of what I'm presenting you today. So let's dive right in, and let's dive in with, I think, a phrase and a saying that so many of us see all of the time plastered everywhere, that the secret path to success is that we should follow our passion. We see it in graduation speeches, we see it in job postings, we see it in company mission statements. We hear it all of the time, that is follow your passion. That is how you become successful. And in fact, if you look at the data, passion is increasingly becoming a key hiring and promotion criteria. Organizations have internalized that this is one dimension, one attribute that they want to make decisions on. And our MBA students, they've internalized that too. I ran a survey and I asked them, what are some of your most important goals that you have for your future career? And over 90% of them said that one of the things that they want from their future jobs is the ability to pursue their passion. And you know what? This isn't a silly idea that organizations and individuals have. In fact, when you look at the academic literature, what you see is that people who are more passionate for their work, they also have higher job satisfaction, they perform better at their work, and they also have higher career earnings in the long run. So if you take all of this together, it comes as no surprise that if you do what you love, the famous saying goes, you'll never have to work another day in your life. Everything is magic as long as you follow your passion. Right? Right. But that doesn't seem to gel with my experience or the experience a lot of other people have. I know plenty of people who are pursuing their passion, and they don't seem to believe that it is that easy. And let me tell you, when I started my PhD, and I was a year into my PhD, and I was so passionate that it drove me to leave Europe where I lived before, move to New York and get my PhD. And after a year, that passion was gone. I was not feeling it anymore. It was actually really, really challenging. I was so annoyed at all of these people telling me that the surest way to success is to follow my passion, that would be so easy to do, but actually it really isn't. In my experience, that experience is not singular. In fact, there are plenty of studies of people who are pursuing their passion, people like teachers, like nurses, like civil servants, who say that there are many days when they are pursuing their passion that they struggle to do so, where it is really hard for them and where they face a number of challenges. And those challenges, they seem to fall along two different dimensions. One of those dimensions has to do with time. is that there's something every single day about pursuing your passion that seems to interfere with what we have to do outside of work, and that those two things seem to be in conflict with each other. And the second thing that seems to happen every single day when we pursue our passion is that passion just places a huge amount of demands on us in terms of the focus on dedication that passion expects from us and demands of us, and the amount of energy that we actually have to give, and that there seems to be something about burning out that seems to be happening here. And so what I'm going to show you today is data from two different papers where I asked the following question. People who are pursuing their passion, right, who on average might be passionate for the work, how do they actually navigate every single day? Like, what does it actually mean every single day to pursue your passion? Why is it so challenging, and what can we do about it? That's what the goal for today. And just to give you a frame of how we're going to think about this theoretically and methodologically. So theoretically, how I define passion is as having three key components: as a strong feeling toward a personally important value that motivates intentions and behaviors. And so let me break that down for a second. On any given moment, when you are passionate for your work, what it means is that you're experiencing this strong feeling. It can be both positive and negative, but it certainly is a strong feeling. That strong feeling is experienced towards something that you care about, that is identity relevant, that reflects part of who you are, and that it makes you want to do more of the kinds of things that reflect what it is that you care about. So if I'm passionate, for example, about salsa dancing, which I am, I feel this strong burning feeling inside of me. And being passionate about salsa, it's important to me. It's a reflection of who I am, and it makes me want to do more salsa dancing. That's what it means to be passionate about something. It's those three key components. And throughout the rest of today's talk, I'll be adopting a so-called within-person lens. So what that means is that I'm going to be measuring data from the same people multiple times a day over a set of a day to explore why people struggle in their daily pursuit of passion, to try to uncover what those challenges are and how people face them. And what that allows me to do is I can look at what is happening within each day, how people respond to the challenges that arise within each day, how people respond to the challenges that arise across days, as well as how different kinds of people respond to the different kinds of challenges that they face. That's what this approach buys me and allows me to do. So let's start with the very first demand. Let's start talking about time. And let's start to think about how passion affects how people deal with the time every single day. So what a lot of research shows is that on any given day, when people are more passionate for their work, what they also do is they prioritize all the things that they need to do for their work. And what that means is that they want to dedicate more of their personal resources, their time, their energy into addressing whatever work-related demands come their way. So in any given day, when people are more passionate, they want to show that this is something that they care about. They want to show their dedication. And while you can do that in a number of different ways, a common cultural script that we have here, particularly in the US, is that you show your dedication by working longer hours. It's part of what's so-called the ideal worker norm, is that in order to be dedicated to your work and show your dedication to others, the surest way to do that is to work longer hours. And so what I'm predicting here, so what's going to happen is that on any given day, when people are more passionate for their work, they're also going to work longer hours because their work is more important to them. But there is a challenge in extending your workday when you're passionate. And the challenge, it's pretty obvious. Time is non-zero sum. What that means is, time is fully zero sum. So what that means is, if you do more of one thing, you spend your time more on, say, work-related responsibilities, that also means you have less time for non-work responsibilities, like all the things that we need to do outside of work. If we're spending more time working, that also means we have less time to dedicate to all the things that we have to do outside of work. And that is great if we can fully make these compromises. But there's a lot of research suggesting that different kinds of people have to make these compromises in a number of different ways. And particularly here, I want to talk about gender. And this notion, particularly here in this common cultural script that we adopt, that a lot of women in the US are expected to be so-called managers of the household. What that means is that women in the US are often expected to take on household chores that are less movable. So for example, women in the US are more likely to be expected to cook for their families every evening, which is something that you cannot move. People are going to be hungry. Whereas men often take on household chores that are more movable, like mowing the lawn, whether you do that today or tomorrow, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And that women are less likely to ask, as well as just be able to actually ask their partner to take on household chores on any given day. And that's just because of the common cultural scripts that we adopt here in the United States. So let me make this more concrete and tell you a little bit more about how that actually looks like on any given day. So imagine you have one day has 24 hours, and then any given day, you have 3 things that you need to do, right? You need to work, you have your household chores, and then people also have to sleep and maybe engage some time in leisure activities. On a more passionate day, as I mentioned earlier, I predict that people are going to work longer hours. So work now takes more of the 24 hours that individuals have in any given day. Now, how do people deal with the household chores that they still have to do and with the leisure and the sleep that they still want to do? Like, this doesn't just fit in the 24 hours that people have available. So one of these things has to be reduced. If your working day extends because of your passion driving you to do so, either your household labor has to reduce or your leisure and sleep has to reduce. When I predict, just to be clear here, is that what happens to men is that men reduce their household time. It's that men, they are more flexible because of the household chores they take on. They're more flexible because they're more likely to ask their partners to take on household chores, so that on any given day, when their passion drives them to work longer hours, they're also more likely to reduce their household time. And that's how they make the 24 hours fit. But women, because their household time is less flexible, they can't reduce the amount of time that they spend on household time. They're less able to do so. And so one thing that's got to give is their leisure and sleep. And that is what I predict actually leads to greater work-family conflict for women as they're trying to navigate the different disparities that arise in their time use. Whereas men, because they're more flexible in household time, they can actually allocate their time much more so to their passion without necessarily suffering any detriments when it comes to what it means to pursue their passion any given day. So just to be clear, the prediction here is that on any given day, when people are passionate for the work and therefore they work longer hours, it's women that are going to experience more work-family conflict than men. Okay, so let me show you how exactly we tested this, and I'll show you a study that we ran. This was done with full-time employees at a large tech company. And as I mentioned earlier, the way that we're surveying people here is we're surveying people several times a day. In this case, it was twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, for 20 consecutive working days. And this gives us an understanding of how people adjudicate what happens every single day, how they respond to challenges, and as well, what consequences that has when we're thinking about things across day. So in total, we have data from over 200 employees. They each provided nearly 3,000 observations. Majority of our sample is female. A lot of them were either married or in a relationship. And a small proportion of people also had at least one kid, which I think is important as we're thinking about how people actually allocate their household time. And so some of the key measures and how we're thinking about measuring these things. So we measured every morning how passionate people felt they were for the work. Then every evening, we asked people to tell us how many hours they worked that day, right? This was in order to get an understanding. Is it the case that when people are more passionate for the work in the morning, in the evening, they also report that they work longer hours? We also asked them the next morning to tell us, last night, how long did you spend on household chores? And we also asked them to tell us, last night, like, what is the share of household chores that you took on? And what is the share of household chores that your partner took on? So those are the 4 key measures. And again, the prediction here is that any given morning, you're more passionate for your work. In the evening, you're going to report that you work longer hours, and that has different consequences for men and for women. That for men, they're able to reduce the household chores, able to reduce the division of labor, whereas women are less able to do that because they're less flexible to do so. So let me show you what the results look like. So just as we predicted, any given day that people were more passionate for their work in the morning, they also ended up working longer working hours. And one of the things that's important here is that doesn't seem to be moderated by gender. What that means is both men and women extend their workday equally when they are more passionate for their work. What is interesting, and that's just as predicted, is that gender does seem to moderate the relationship here between working hours and household chores, meaning that on any given day, men were able to reduce their household chores that they were working on when they were more passionate for the work, but women were not able to do that. Let me just plot this so that you have an understanding of what this looks like. So here on the x-axis, you have working hours. So left means less working hours, and to the right, you'll see more working hours. And on the y-axis, I plotted the amount of household chores that people do. So higher means more household chores, and lower means less household chores. And here, you see the amount of household chores that men and women do as their working hours expand. So what you see, particularly if you look at the lower right quadrant, is that as working hours extend, men reduce the amount of household chores that they take on, much more so than women. So women do that a little bit. Is that what they're able to do, to reduce their household chores? But men are much more able to do that. And just as a note, the slope for men is statistically significant, whereas the slope for women is not. And so here what it seems to show is that men, because they are more flexible, they can afford to spend less time on household chores on days when their passion drives them to work longer hours. We see a similar pattern emerge for this division of labor, right? How much of the household tasks last night did you take on? How much of the household tasks last night did your partner take on? So here again, on the x-axis, we're plotting working hours. Left means less working hours, right means more working hours. On the y-axis, it's household division. And we see here a similar pattern where, again, it's men that say that their partner did everything when their passion led them to work longer hours. Whereas for women, even though that slope here is trending positive, again, that's not statistically significant. And so what we're seeing here is that men, they pawn off more of their household chores on any given day where their passion drives them to work longer hours. And then when we draw these indirect effects, we also see that it's really the underlying passion in any given day that's driving this. And so what that means is on any given day, women are more likely to experience a greater amount of work-family conflict because our passion seems to conflict with the non-work responsibilities in a way that for men it doesn't, because men are afforded just a greater amount of flexibility and a greater amount of ability to pawn off their household chores on others. And so what this seems to suggest is that passion places these time demands on people, but that these time demands interfere more for those who have not just greater non-work responsibilities, but less flexible non-work responsibilities. And in this case, we're framing this in terms of women, because in the United States, they have less flexible household chores, and therefore they're less able to do that. And that then leads to greater amount of work-family conflict. And so one of the challenges that seem to be happening here in any given day, one of the struggles of the pursuit of passion any given day, is that the time demands of passion, they conflict with whatever's happening outside of work. And some people, but not others, are actually able to accommodate and make room for the way in which passion extends a workday, and others are not. Okay, let me talk about energy, because I think energy is the second component, the second demand that the daily pursuit of passion places on people. So again, think of this notion. What does it actually mean to be passionate for your work on any given day? When you're more passionate for your work on any given day, your passion takes up more of your mind. It takes up more of what it is that you care about and more of what you focus on, which can be good if you're just thinking about what happens at work. But that same thing also means that you're going to have a harder time psychologically detaching from your work. What that means is you're going to have a harder time actually thinking about non-work responsibilities without your work responsibilities, without what it is that you're passionate about at work actually intruding into your mind, so that you can have a clean transition from your work roles to your non-work roles. And so your work may actually take on an overpowering role on a particularly passionate day. And what that means is that on any given day, when you're more passionate for your work, you're going to have more rumination about work, even when you're not working. And you're going to have more what's so-called these role boundaries spillovers, meaning that even when you're in a non-work role, whether you're a parent, you're a partner, or you're engaging in a hobby or leisure activity, that you will be drawn to your work role, that you'll still be thinking of yourself as an employee, as a supervisor, as a coworker, as a subordinate. You're going to have a harder time transitioning out of that. And so on any given day that employees are passionate for their work, what I predict here is that they're also going to have a harder time detaching from the work after the work hours are over. And that's complicated. And it's complicated because what we know is that on any given day, when people are unable to actually psychologically detach from their work, they're also going to have a much harder time adequately recovering from the demands of their work, because we need to psychologically detach in order to recover from the demands that work places on us. So putting that together, what that means is that on any given day that we're passionate about our work, yes, we're going to be more focused. Yes, we're going to be more dedicated on our work. but we're also going to have a harder time psychologically detaching from our work. And that makes it harder for us to recover, and it places us at greater risk of being more emotionally exhausted the next morning when we show up for work. And so the hypothesis here is that following a particularly passionate day, employees are going to be more emotionally exhausted because they're going to have a harder time psychologically detaching from their work. Let me show you some data on how we actually measured this. I'm going to show you 2 studies here in order to show you that link and a couple of other interesting complications down the line. So the first thing that we did here is that we recruited individuals this time through an extensive screening procedure to make sure that we ended up with full-time employees through Amazon Mechanical Turk, but later on I'll show you replication done in a professional services company. We asked people again for 30 consecutive work days. Here we asked people once every evening to tell us how things are going. And ultimately we ended up with over 500 people who provided over 13,000 observations. And again, here on average, we're about 50% female, average age is about 36 years old, and they come from a wide variety of industries. So here we're able to really look at a really broad lens of industries. And then in the next study, I'll show you how that looks like in one particular industry. And relatively straightforward measures. And remember, we asked this every single day. So we wanted to keep the surveys relatively short. We asked people how passionate they were for the work today and how burned out from the work that they feel that day. And in this study, what we found is that on any given day, the more passionate people were today, the more emotionally exhausted they were the next day. So if you're passionate today, you're more emotionally exhausted tomorrow. And so a very simple takeaway from the study is that over time, passion can become exhausting because of the daily energy demands it imposes on us. It makes it harder for us to actually get the recovery necessary. And I'll show you some mechanistic evidence in the next study. But before I do that, there was one interesting twist to this study that we didn't necessarily foresee ahead of time. In order to understand that, let me show you actually what happens when we plot emotional exhaustion. So what I'm showing you on the x-axis is every single day. So remember the days we surveyed people for 30 days. So this is just order from the first day that we started to the last day. And on the y-axis, I'm going to plot the average emotional exhaustion response across all participants in the sample. And the graph looks a little crazy, but I'll break it down for you. So you see every single data point plotted, but the red line is the average emotional exhaustion line. And so on average, people were round about a 3.5, except if your eagle eyes show you that day. That day, for some reason, people were way below 3, and it really stands out. And it turns out that that day was Labor Day. And in the US, Labor Day weekend is a really special weekend. How special? We did another data analysis to find out how special. We asked people to respond to our surveys on a normal weekend and on Labor Day weekend. And what we find is that on Labor Day weekend, people spend much more time in leisure activities. They spend much more time with family, friends than on normal weekends. And it makes sense, right? On normal weekends, we have a lot of other things we need to do. We have household chores we need to get done. Sometimes we still have work to catch up on. But Labor Day weekend is special because it's a day where everybody's off, or most people are off. There's some people who obviously have to work, essential workers, etc. But where many people are off, and where there's this common cultural norm that you hang out and spend time together in some form of social leisure or active leisure, either with yourself or with others. And in fact, what we find is that on Labor Day weekend, people are much more psychologically detached from the work than on any other normal weekend. And that subsequent to Labor Day weekend, people are also much less emotionally exhausted. And so what we found in our sample is that the day after Labor Day, people actually report much higher levels of passion for their work. And what we take this to mean is that being forced to take a break, like this Labor Day weekend, right, which kind of is imposed on people they don't necessarily have a huge amount of control over, but when it's forced on people to take a break where they engage in active leisure activity or spend time with family, friends, where they psychologically detach, where their emotional exhaustion decrease, they actually have higher levels of passion better. So there's something about being forced to take a break that actually allows employees to be more sustainable in their pursuit of passion and to regulate their passion better. And so to delve deeper into this, we ran another study, as I mentioned. This time, we ran a study at one organization. It was a large and multinational professional services company. They offered consulting and advisory services. And here for 10 consecutive work days, from Monday through Friday, we asked people twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, to respond to the survey. So we've got about over 200 employees with over 3,600 observations to calm us in the wrong spot here. People on average were 46% female. They were a fair deal younger than another survey just because of the type of the company they were working in. And on average, they worked in this company for just about more than 2 years. And just to give you a sense of the key measures, right? So similar than in our previous studies, we again measure passion for their work each morning. The next morning, we asked people how emotionally exhausted they were last night. And here in this study, we also asked people about their psychological detachment. So the next morning, we asked them to what extent in the evening they were able to actually get a break from thinking about work and think about the demands of their work. But we're also intrigued here by this idea of being forced to take a break, right? Being forced to actually have some control over your passion. And we wondered, is it the case that some people volitionally, that some people just by who they are able to take a break from their passion, are able to actually control their passion and regulate it in a particular way? And so what we did in this study is that we additionally asked people every single evening, whether on that day they felt that they were able to control their passion, or whether they felt that they were being controlled by their passion. And so we additionally asked that every single evening, whether today they had a tough time controlling their need to do work, or whether they were actually able to control their passion on any given day. And so here's what we find. What we find is that, yes, when you're more passionate for your work, you have a harder time psychologically detaching from your work, and it makes it more likely that you're more emotionally exhausted on the next day. But that's only limited to people who felt controlled by their passion. So when you feel like your passion is driving you, you don't have a good handle on it, that is when people have a harder time psychologically detaching from the work. And that's what makes it more likely that people are more emotionally exhausted on the next day. But in contrast, when people felt that they were in control of their passion, these effects disappeared, or in some cases, they even reversed. So what that means is that people who are able to exert control over their passion on any given day, they were able to reap the benefits of passion without suffering the detriments. And I'll show you in a little bit exactly what that looked like in a follow-up study that we did. But the one thing I want to highlight here is that even people who on one day were able to control their passion were not able to do so in subsequent days. What I mean by that is, it isn't the case, it's not the case, that some people on average are better able to control their passion on any given day, and that switches off these effects. What seems to be the case is that on any given day, some people are able to be in greater control of their passion, but then on other days, those very same people have a hard time doing that and feel controlled by their passion, and vice versa. And it's an open question that I don't have an answer for right now, that we're continuing doing research on why that's the case and how we can actually address that. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But what that seems to suggest is that when you're feeling like and able to be in charge of your passion, that allows you to actually meet the demands that daily levels of passion place on you in terms of the energy that it takes out of you. And so, as I mentioned, we got really interested in this question, like, what does it mean to be in charge of your passion? Like, how do people actually go about doing that? And so we asked 200 people to actually report their strategies to control passion. Like, how do you go about controlling your passion on any given day? And here's a broad categorization of some of the things that people told us about how they go about doing that. Some people told us that they actively build in rest, and they try to do their very best to stick to that. So for example, this participant wrote, I made a flexible schedule to follow that prioritizes the tasks that I care about, but also budgets in time for breaks so that my passion for work stays steady over the day. Or another one wrote, I had to control myself from continuing to work even later in the evening. So note, this participant was fully aware of the fact that if they leaned into their passion, they would feel compelled to work longer. But instead they controlled themselves and they said, I know my passion is going to make me work longer hours today. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try to control that and bring that back. There's another set of categories that we see here where people, they actively tried to control and be mindful of how their passion was driving them. One person wrote, when I found myself becoming too passionate and getting too wound up, I intentionally calm myself down to be more in control. This person recognized that sometimes when you're too passionate about something, that can also skew your perception of what is important. It can skew your perception of what you should be doing. And finally, the last person here, I acknowledged my feelings and passion. I let them run through me. And then I chose the most pragmatic course of action, not necessarily the action that their passion made them feel like was really important, but what they felt like upon reconsideration was actually important to do. A lot of this has to do with the person themselves. There's actually a really important role of coworkers and of supervisors here, right? There are some coworkers, some people that recognize that they need to talk to their supervisors about the issues and concerns with work, and that actually allowed them to look at the situation differently. Some people actually asked for very different kinds of work. One person recognized, look, like the work that I'm doing doesn't make me passionate or makes me too passionate. Let me try to regulate what it is that I'm actually working on. And some people even thought about the beneficiaries of the work, the audiences, the clients that they're working with, and how that actually allowed them to reshape how much control they had over their passion. But I really, really, really want to highlight the last one, the structural issues, right? One person writing, I now have daycare in place for today so I can focus my passion back toward the work. Yesterday, I had to hold it back to avoid frustration. There are some structural issues, like here in this case, a lack of childcare, then that can also impose on people, make it really difficult for them to actually be in control of your passion. Like if there are structural issues going on, like here, the closure of daycare, that makes it really hard for people to focus on their passion. That can be difficult. The last person here, I had a patient that was rude and just plain ugly to me. This is the kind of thing that will change your passion at work. There's also some elements of our work structures that make it really challenging for people to remain in control of their passion. And I think this is one of the things that can change why some people are in charge of their passion on one day and actually make it really hard for people to be in charge of their passion on other days. But I tried taking that insight, right? This idea that there's some individual level things that people can do in order to take charge and be in control of their passion. And so let me tell you about a failed field experiment that I did where I worked together with a company and I asked them, hey, you know what? It's really important that people are in charge of their passion. Why don't you ask half of your employees tomorrow to schedule a break during their work so they can actually control their passion better, no matter how passionate they are, so they can actually just take a little break. And that's really important, right? Because we know how important it is to take breaks to regulate your passion, to make sure that your energy demands don't overexhaust you. Let me tell you about the really fun part about this experiment. 80% of people that we asked to plan a break, they didn't end up taking that break. And those were short breaks. We told people to take a 5-minute break. We took all the insights from behavioral science. We asked people to plan a very concrete break, tell us exactly what they were going to do, to plan exactly who they were going to do it with. They created a beautiful detailed list. We asked people to put it in their calendar. And yet 80% of people did not take a break, even if it was supposed to be a 5-minute short break. And so we asked them, wait a minute, why didn't you take that short break that we told you was super important, that you already scheduled and you told us exactly what you were going to do? And the majority of people, you know what they told us? They said that they were worried that they would be judged negatively by their coworkers and their supervisors. Particularly, they'd be judged for feeling like they're slacking off when they're taking a break during work. This is the culture that we're up against. It's so deeply ingrained that even feeling like a 5-minute break could be perceived as slacking off by others. And that's just because the culture that we're up against is that people believe that the best way to show your passion is through constant commitment and through constant dedication. And you cannot allow yourself even to take the shortest of breaks. And so I think there's this broader narrative here that we need to reshape the conversation that we're having, and that the conversation that we should be having is that passion is something that needs to be cultivated by organization in order for it to be maintained by employees. And what I mean by that is, I've shown you all these examples earlier on about organizations hiring for passion, right? Saying that they would love to attract people who are passionate for the work. It cannot end there. You can't just hire people who are passionate for the work. You also need to think very carefully about how you can create the right working environment. And I'm talking not just about the right working environment in terms of like the fun tasks to work on, or the right environment, the job autonomy, but also the structural issues that might affect some employees more than others. How you create that environment that actually allows people to cultivate their passion and that is an organization's job rather than being maintained by their employees. So the thought I want to end you with, the thought I want to leave you with is the following, is that the daily pursuit of passion is really hard. So that it's not the case that if you do what you love, you'll never have to work another day. I'm sorry if that is not necessarily fun news, but it's super hard to pursue your passion every single day. And so to complement this notion of passion being something that's exciting, that's fun, that we should lean into, I want to offer a second way of thinking about passion. I'm not saying that this one way is a bad way. I'm saying it's an incomplete way. And so here's a second way that I want you to think about passion. And I'm going to introduce a word that comes from the German language that is actually the German translation for passion that I think really nicely captures this complementary perspective that I'm developing here. And it's this notion that we can think of passion as Leidenschaft. And Leidenschaft is a portmanteau of two words in German of both hardship and ability. And so in German, if you're passionate about something, it's about having the ability to endure hardship. What it means is that the day-to-day process of pursuing your passion, it might suck. Like every now and then it could be fun, but more overarchingly, it's actually really hard, but you do it because you care about it. You do it because it's really important to you. You do it because it reflects something about yourself that really matters to you. But on any given day, that can actually be really challenging. And so what I want you to take away is that people, they can struggle to pursue their passion because doing so on any given day is exhausting. That recuperation, focusing on recovery is really important, but the passion can distort your recognition that you actually need it. And that it places time demands on people. And not all people are equally able to fulfill those time demands, particularly in the structural settings and the cultural settings that we live in here in the US today. But I want to end with a lot of open questions, projects, and ideas that we're currently exploring, as well as with an open invitation to join with us. We're hoping to do more research on this. If you're interested to do research with us on this, please let me know. I'll drop my contact information in just a little bit. But here's a couple of questions that we've been asking ourselves. One of them is how people actually are able to control their daily pursuit of passion sustainably. Like, what does it actually look like? We don't know at the moment. I can only tell you what some people do, but I'm unable to actually find out what it is that we could do to help people actually sustainably be in control of their passion. What it actually means to make a difference or think that you're making a difference when you're pursuing your passion, only to find out that the difference that you're trying to make falls short of your expectations, that you're not making the difference that you were hoping to make. I'm also curious about what it means for couples to navigate the daily pursuit of passion. I showed you one of the challenges having to do with household labor and who does household labor when the time and energy demands of passion happen and impinge on any single person any given day. How do two people who are actively pursuing their passion and who feel these time and energy demands impinging on them, how do they adjudicate that? What happens in this couple that actually makes it more or less likely that they're able to do that? What about teams? This is all a very individualistic or interpersonal perspective, but what does it actually mean for teams to pursue their passion? We all want to be managers of high-performing teams. We would love to have high-performing teams working where all people are passionate for the work. How do you actually do that? What organizational interventions are out there? Like I said, it would be great if organizations had this culture shift towards cultivating passion. But like realistically, on a day-to-day level, what does that look like? What are the practices that organizations can adopt to help their employees do that? And finally, many, many other questions that I'm hoping you'll be able to bring up and that we can discuss. And so I want to end here. I want to thank my awesome collaborators. These people were all a huge part of making this research possible. I want to thank them. I want to make sure that they are appreciated for all the amazing and awesome work that you do. And here are my contact information. I'll also drop it in the chat in just a little bit. And I'm now going to close down my slides. I'm going to address many, many, many other questions that you come this way. And thank you so much for listening. All right, Maya, do you want me to take the questions or would you like to moderate? Maya, you're on mute.
Please go ahead if you'd like to grab them. I know you have them on your screen, so go ahead. And thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Okay, and I just dropped my contact information into the chat so that people are able to see them. Okay, so I'll take Benjamin Lira Lekis. I'll take your question first. You asked, do you think that passion interplays with SES? I think that a lower SES, you're right, could correlate with structural barriers to being driven by passion. I absolutely think that SES drives and has a curious interplay here with passion. I'm curious how you think about it, but one of the ways that I've been thinking about it is that pursuing your passion in many ways is a gigantic luxury. What I mean by that is there are many jobs that afford you to pursue your passion, but as a result, they pay you less, right? It's like the passion premium. If you think of the non-for-profit sector that attracts people who ostensibly want to pursue your passion, but then the remuneration isn't that great. There's many other professions that allow you to pursue your passion where the working conditions are terrible. Like if you love cooking, should you become a chef? Like think about what the working conditions of a chef are like. They're not great working conditions. The salary is not particularly great. And it is true that different kinds of people just are more and less sensitive to different attributes of jobs. And I think we're doing people a disservice if we put passion on a pedestal and we say that the only way to success is if you pursue your passion, and that's the only way to advance in society, when there are many people who just don't really have the ability to pursue their passion because the working conditions or the salary remunerations or other aspects of the job don't reflect what their own priorities are. And B, not everybody has to pursue their passion at work. There's plenty of ways you can pursue your passion. You can pursue your passion outside of work. If I'm passionate about salsa dancing, do I really have to become a salsa dancer and teacher? I don't think that that's how I want to make a difference in the world. I am very happy being a salsa dancer outside of work. And so thinking about the different ways in which you can pursue your passion in a number of different domains, I think is much, much, much more important. But I think you're absolutely right that some of this definitely correlates with SES, right, socioeconomic status, and whether or not some people feel like they have other priorities that they need to fulfill that the pursuit of passion doesn't necessarily afford them. So thank you for that wonderful question. There's a number of questions around same-sex couples and how we thought about gender. I want to make sure I get this. So Sam Elghanayan asked a question about whether the findings vary, if at all, for same-gender couples. We had anonymous attendee ask whether or not the study included same-sex couples, or how we captured gender and if I have data on transgender versus cisgender. So in the data that I showed you, because this was data collected from an organization, the vast majority, I want to say over 95% of couples are cisgender heterosexual couples. We don't have data on same-sex couples or sufficient data on same-sex couples as well as non-cisgender couples. So I'd love to do more research on that. There is a growing sociology research on what it actually looks like when we're thinking about household labor and the different divisions of household labor that occur there. There's a different kind of household bargaining that is happening here, but I think super interesting to delve deeper into this. But unfortunately, the data that we collected, given the organizational setting that we were in, just didn't sufficiently sample populations that were non-heterosexual and non-cisgender. So unfortunately, we were limited by that. Lily Zhu asks whether we differentiate between different types of passion. Yes, this is what I mean with being in control of your passion and not being in control of your passion. So that's exactly what we find. And you're right on the nose about obsessive passion being more exhausting than harmonious passion. I just changed the terminology for the purposes of the talk because I find obsessive and harmonious passion to be a challenging way of talking about it, particularly at the daily level. But in the paper, we talk about it in terms of harmonious and obsessive passion. Just to be more closely aligned with the academic literature in this case. So let me take Jorge Caraballo's question. Have you considered that you can be very passionate, but that doesn't lead to working extra hours? Can you be passionate and still protect time for leisure and rest and family? And I think the answer to this is I would love if that were the case. And what I'm highlighting, I think, in this talk is that there are forces both internally as well as externally that place demands on people that make it less likely that that is the case. And so the internal forces being that what we're passionate about, when we're passionate about our work, we feel like that is more important and that we should dedicate more time to that. The forces being that the way that we express our dedication and commitment, particularly in US culture, is by working longer hours. And the people, you saw the data, the people feel bad about taking a break. Like, have you ever thought about what your supervisor, your colleagues might say, and the levels of passion they infer if you say that you're going to go home at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Like, they're going to they're going to infer that you're not passionate for the work, when actually, like, you might just be looking after your own passion, but that is the inference because of the broader cultural script that exists. So absolutely, I want to change that. And hopefully, like, we can all start having those conversations about what it means to pursue our passion. And that maybe things like working less, particularly on days when you are more passionate, is really important. That imposing more boundaries on days when we are more passionate is super important. But we're not doing that right now because the current cultural scripts don't allow us to do that right now. And we need to fight against those internal and external effects that are currently driving us to do that. So I think you're right on the money. I would love if that were the case. And I'm trying to find out, that's why I'm thinking about those interventions. I'm trying to find out, how do you go about doing that? How can we design organizations that actually allow individuals and employees to cultivate their passion? But that should be a goal for organizations. You can't just leave employees with those devices because they are faced with pressures that make it less likely for them to do that. Let me just take a quick sip of water. It's the problem of being passionate. You don't really drink much. Charlotte Chu asks a really important question. Do most people have passion in one area of our lives, like work or hobby, or should we strive for passion in every aspect of our lives? Now, I think one of the things that is really important here is that people have many things in life that they care about, or dare I say many things in life that people are passionate about. And I think one of the challenges is that we think that we should be passionate about everything at work. That all of our passions, everything that we care about, particularly in US society, that needs to be satisfied by what we do at work. And there's actually a similar trend happening in romantic relationships. Eli Finkel at Northwestern has a wonderful book where he details this. It's called The All or Nothing Marriage, where we have increasing expectations of our partners, where our partners are meant to fulfill all of our needs. I actually think that a much healthier perspective when we're thinking about the various interests and values that we have in life is a portfolio approach. In a portfolio approach, you look at your life, you look at the different areas in your life where you might be able to fulfill what it is that you care about. And it doesn't matter whether one thing fulfills everything. In fact, if one thing fulfills everything, that is a particularly risky asset. If you look at like the financial management literature, they never tell you to invest all of your money into one stock. And in the exact same way, I don't think that we should place all of our values into one particular domain. If I derive all of my worth in life from work, and work doesn't go well in a day, like, how can I derive value and self-worth? And instead, thinking about a portfolio approach where maybe there are some needs and some values that I'm able to fulfill through work, and some needs and other values I'm able to fulfill outside of work, and my hobbies and my family and my friendships and my relationship. I think that's a much healthier perspective to think about it. So rather than, I think, being so doggedly driven on pursuing our passion at work, being more open-minded that passion is something you can pursue in a number of different domains, and that it's totally fine. Like, not everybody needs to be passionate for their work. And I think the challenge is that in our current culture, we don't sufficiently celebrate people who view their job as a job. But newsflash, like, some people are great at their job and view their job as a job. And we should celebrate those people more because they happen to be passionate about other things more. I think that also, so Eric Levesque also asks a similar question where he talks a little bit more about what it actually means to pursue your passion outside of work. The one thing I will say is that when you take your passion into work, something really weird starts to happen. When I'm passionate about something outside of work, the audience that I have with my work is me, maybe like my friends, but I have control over my audience. When I take my passion into the work domain, now I impose a so-called market logic on that. What I mean is that now my passion is in competition with every person's passion in the world, right? So if I happen to be passionate, say again, like me, about salsa dancing, I do it outside of work. How good I am, I don't know. That's really up to me and my standard. Like, maybe I go on the dance floor and like I get a sense of how good of a dancer I am, depending on how much people want to talk to me and how much people want to dance with me. But that's about it. But when I make my dancing like my main job, now I'm competing with every other dancer in the world, and I'm going to be ranked on how good of a teacher I am or how good of a dancer I am. And then things get really tricky, especially if I now get feedback on that in the domain that necessarily I might not be super good at. So that can be really, really, really challenging because the market logic start infiltrating what it is that I care about. And so that's why I find it really challenging when people are told that they should bring their passion and make it their work. For some people that might work great, for other people that might be really, really challenging. And so I totally share your hypothesis, Eric. People who are entrepreneurs who turn their passion into a career have a very different relationship with their passion than people who either take a more portfolio approach or who, like you, pursue their passion outside of work, which I think, again, is a really important and celebrated way to do that. And I think is super important. Sorry. Let me just look at some other questions and make sure that I have answered them. So I answered Sam's. Charlotte's question was answered. Eric's question was answered. Thank you for the kind words, Sandra. Okay, so Sony Tadani asks a great question. So say you're a manager. Sony asks, how do you differentiate between people taking a break to refresh and employees slacking off? Like, we know that employees can also slack off and shirk their work responsibilities. And how do we actually get people to really take a break? I think the key distinction here is using a break as an active leisure opportunity. So the leisure literature differentiates between active and passive leisure activities. Passive leisure activities are things where you're not really engaged all that much. It's things like watching TV, right? Where like it doesn't really require a lot of your autonomous regulation in order to be engaged in a leisure activity. Whereas active leisure activities are things where you actively have to be engaged in, like reading a book, for example, that requires your autonomous control. And decades of research show that active leisure activities are particularly replenishing for people versus passive leisure activities where there might be some effects, but those effects happen to be much smaller. And other studies seem to suggest that the effects even can be null in some cases. And so I think as a manager, allowing your employees particularly to take active leisure breaks, going for a walk, reading a book, calling a friend, engaging in a hobby, those are all active leisure opportunities. And so being very clear with employees about what a break looks like and asking them to schedule breaks, put them in their calendar, plan those breaks so that they can engage in active leisure activities. I think that can be a really nice way that managers do that. And then also leading by example. You know, like if you're working until 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 p.m. in the evening and you continue sending emails to your coworkers, you're also sending a signal to your coworkers that that's what's expected and that that's what's valued. Even if you write in your emails, oh, I have weird working hours, don't mind me working 60, 70 hours a week, like you're also telling people that you're working long. Now, there are some challenges, right? People who have inflexible schedules because of childcare responsibilities, etc. Of course, they're going to work around that. And there is a way to frame that to say, my working hours are probably not your working hours. And that's not because I work 80 hours a week. It's because I have childcare responsibilities I need to take on. So that's totally legit. And if you don't have those disclaimers in, what you're signaling to people is that taking a break is a bad idea. And so like being open and communicative about the within their work breaks that you yourself take is something really powerful that managers can do themselves. Yes, Charlotte, I'm also looking at the questions in the Q&A. I'm trying to do my very best to do chat and Q&A. Okay, let me talk about what collaborations look like. An anonymous attendee asked me that question, and I love that question. So there are two main ways to collaborate. One, imagine if you're an employee, a manager at an organization, and you say, you know what, this is amazing, and we need to do more of it. Reach out to me, and we can collect data in your organization and find out how to do this. So either we collect survey data, we design interventions together to find out how to do this. Reach out to me, we'll schedule some time to talk, and we'll figure it out. The second thing, if you're a student and you want to do research on this, in my lab, we're always looking for people to help us. What I would recommend is that before you contact, or if you contact us, the first thing I'll tell you is brush up on your stat skills. We work with within-person methods. Within-person methods is a very important toolkit, meaning make sure that you in your R skills, you know how to do structural equation modeling, that you know how to do multi-level modeling, that you understand within-person methods. Ideally, that you have experience in a software called M+. M+ is designed to model within-person effects, because a question that we ask in my lab is, why do people struggle to pursue their passion? That's a within-person question that requires within-person methods. If you want to do research on that, that's what you're going to need to have to learn first before you can actually run any kind of studies. But please reach out to me. Whether you're working in an organization, we can collect data, we can design interventions. Whether you're a student, you want to do research on this, brush up on your stat skills, reach out to me. I can also provide you with resources. An anonymous attendee also asks how much of passion I think is genetic. I think what this question really asks is how much of passion I think is fixed and how much of passion I think is malleable. And what I think the answer here is I think everybody has the capacity to be passionate for things. Different people have different affordances in life, and the extent to which they've been able to develop their interests, the extent to which they've been able to gain clarity on who they are. Different people have different expectations of what they need from their work and from their life. Different people have different demands on their life. But I actually think it's really important that we understand that everybody has the ability to pursue their passion, and that what it means to pursue your passion can look very different for different kinds of people. That for some people that's at work, and for some people that's outside of work. So I think super important to consider that. So I actually think that's really, really important. Let me look at more of the questions. In the field experiment, workers were allowed to schedule whatever break they wanted without other people knowing or with other people knowing. We had a wide variety of different approaches. None of it seemed to be more successful. Again, 80% of people didn't take a break. So it doesn't seem to be the case that there was one dominant strategy. It seemed to work really well. And even there was no commonalities between the 20% of people who were able to take a break. I wish I could tell you that there was something magical that those 20% of people have found, but we couldn't find a pattern there. It seemed to be more about the broader culture that even the people who took a break were worried about people taking time off. Donna Perrick asks a great question. What do I think of companies taking unlimited vacation days? I think that that practice can work as long as it's actually lived. Like, how many companies say you can take off as many days as you want? How many people have you actually seen them take a 2-month sabbatical? But we should celebrate people taking a 2-month sabbatical because that's exactly what the company wants. Or how many people do you see them reduce their workload to a 4-day work week? You know, if people want to, why can't they? So I think it's about the so-called espoused values, what people say they do, and the lived values, what actually happens. And unlimited vacation days as an espoused value, great, as long as it's also lived and people actually do that. So super important, but I think just careful to think through. Let me just look at the questions.
Deanna, was there a question that you noticed that you wanted to ask or lift up? You're muted.
Hi, thanks, Maya. Sorry, there was one from Hannah. She's asking, how do you think that money prestige moderates your findings? For example, people who are exhausted from work but get a raise or promotion, so they don't perceive themselves out of control. That's an attempt to detach or step back.
Yeah, so I think that's a really, really interesting question. So let's say that the way that you have learned to express your passion through the cultural narratives that exist out there and through the way that you observe it in others is by working long hours, being super dedicated, always being exhausted, prioritizing work above all else. And then you happen to get promoted, right? You get rewarded for that financially and by status. And mind you, everybody else in your organization at your level now suffered the exact same amount, right? So the people that are now your peers, they also prioritize work, they also work long hours. And now, like, that thing that binds you together is the sacrifice that you've made. Like, how do you think that shapes your own values? Like, I think that there's a real danger here in that it can warp what it actually means that you care about, and that can sometimes get people to lose sense of some of their priorities. A lot of MBA students that I interact with, they say something along the lines of, after HBS, the first 3, 4, 5 years, I'm going to have to make a lot of money because I need to pay back loans, because I want to advance in companies. And then after that, I'm going to do the non-profit thing. After that, I'm going to do the making a difference thing. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful intention. I don't think that that's a malintention, but I think the challenge there is that after 3 to 5 years, the people that you've surrounded yourself are different. There's a saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. if you spend time around people who've also taken a similar path that's different, your lifestyle is now different, right? There might have been lifestyle changes, like maybe you now have a family, kid that you need to provide for, ailing parents that you need to provide for. And then are you still going to be able to stick to something that happened 5 years ago, right? About who you were 5 years ago. So I think that becomes really challenging. And I think money and prestige definitely factors in, Hannah. So I know we're at time. I know it's 1 p.m. I know there's plenty of questions I didn't get a chance to address. Please feel free to tweet at me, email me, LinkedIn me. I'd love to continue the conversation. Thanks so much for the wonderful, wonderful interactions here. And I hope you all have a wonderful, restful, and passionate day.
Thank you, Jon. Thank you, everyone. Yes, follow us on Twitter. Let us know, email us. We definitely want to continue this conversation. And with that, we will be in touch and see you at the next big webinar. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Jon. We are delighted to have you today. Thank you.
Thank you.